Hello everyone, it's been a little while since the last video, but boy has it blown up. Even the Skeletron himself got in on it, which is huge. Thanks for all the support. Now I'll try not to waste too much of this guy's precious time. Here's the lowdown. We're stuck on a floating platform and we've been tasked with destroying the swarm of bosses from the Calamity mod. This is the second part of the journey, so if you haven't seen the first one, I highly recommend pausing it here and doing so. I'll wait. All done? Great, let's get into it. At the end of the last video, we had just obliterated the wall of flesh. Mostly because he bugged out without blocks to confine his eyes to the actual fight location, but that doesn't matter. With the relic placed, we set out for the next adventure, hard mode. Naturally, our first instincts are to go check out the new blocks in the 1 block's rotation. Using the titanium pickaxe awarded to us for entering hard mode, we begin to mine. New to the catalogue of drops are Palladium, Cobalt, Mithril, Orichalcum, Adamantite, Titanium, Pearlstone, Astral Dirt, Monolith, Ice and Snow, Infernal Swavite and Brimstone Slag. This does represent a bit of an issue though. Calamity mod has rebalanced hard mode ores so that each tier spawns after defeating a mechanical boss, and hallowed ore appears after all 3 are defeated. I imagine this was just a small oversight in the 1 block mod, so we're gonna play by Calamity's rules and avoid using Mithril and Adamantite tiers until I've been quote unquote blessed with them after a mechanical boss defeat. I decided on the Cobalt Mage set, equipping it for some sweet bonuses to mana and magic damage. As per usual, I'm not really sure what to do at the start of hard mode, so I set on farming wyverns for Souls of Flight, which will allow me to make wings. The creation of a few Zerg potions will speed this process up dramatically, and they're relatively cheap too. Since the wyvern is way too strong for me, I try to find a weapon I can actually use that is really viable in hard mode. I figure I may as well try the giant clam in his new hard mode form to see if his drop, the Poseidon, is actually any good. Naturally, I head to the desert biome and use his summoning item. This time he has a lot more health and he'll fire these pearl attacks much more often and summon way more clam fellows. Luckily, he hasn't been buffed too massively and my soon to be obsolete Shade Rain staff manages to bring him down. I equip the Poseidon and try it on the remaining clams, but it really doesn't seem that good. I brainstorm some more and have a look at the recipes available to me. In the recipe browser, I could make the Frigid Flash Bolt, which sounds pretty good to me. The only items I needed were essences of Elysium and Havoc, which drop from enemies in the snow and hell biomes respectively. While farming in hell, I realized that I also have a Frost Staff, which dropped from an ice enemy. It has a really nice damage output and is a pleasant gift from an otherwise underpowered loadout. After a while farming hell enemies, I find that I get no essences of Havoc and realize it only drops from the Brimstone Crag enemies. For this, I'll need to create an artificial crag using Brimstone Slag, a material drop by the 1 block. Although the platform is only small, crag enemies begin to spawn and I get what I need. I head back home and craft the Frigid Flash Bolt and equip it. After testing it out on a few enemies, it clearly is a massive improvement to our DPS and is a welcome addition to the loadout. It makes short work of a few wyverns, earning us the long coveted Souls of Flight. I also want to enhance our healing capabilities, so I create a hallowed biome to the west of the jungle. All that this needs is a platform of dirt with hallowed seeds planted in it. The hallow will spread on its own and allow us to farm pixies for their dust, and that dust can be used in potions. Another requirement for better healing potions is crystals from the underground hallow, so I set off to make one. My first attempt was really scuffed. I mean, look at this. I thought that I could make the hallowed grass spread to some stone blocks, but that doesn't seem to work. I got what pearlstone I had and added some to the stone structure I made, which I'll soon find out also doesn't work. While I wait for the hallow to spread, wink, I set out east and attempt to make hallowed and corrupted deserts, before realizing I could just farm these enemies by creating 2 platforms of each sand, and as the sand spawns the enemy, I don't need the biome. What I'm doing here is farming ingredients for the Ankh Shield, which requires a blindfold from these mummies. I've already acquired a megaphone and a fast clock from the Hallow, which is a nice bonus on top of the potion ingredients. I head back down to check on the Hallowed Underground, only to find that none of the Pearlstone is spread from either source, so I replaced the whole lot. It's in an ugly formation, I know, but it doesn't need to be pretty, again, just functional. This is my only philosophy when it comes to construction in Terraria, shoebox mains on top. Having a proper biome allows me to farm Souls of Light and other Hallow loot, but most importantly, it affords me passive crystal growth. Hallowed mimics also appear, but much like the wyverns, I was no match for him. I was in a bit of a low state here, I couldn't build any forward momentum and I was a little stuck. Then a ray of light appeared. Skeletron Prime appeared and snapped my neck. Man. I stuck to farming the ingredients for the Ankh Shield, creating an artificial marble biome to the west of the underground jungle. This consisted of a singular marble line that enemies could spawn on. With a little help from my friend the Zerg potion, we managed to get the pocket mirror, not before being decimated by Medusa a few times. Like seriously, why can she chain petrify? What is this, man? I finally make some angel wings, which have the added bonus of providing 20 extra life, 10 extra defense, and increased life regen. Combined with the Reforge, this grants us a super serious 16 defense, which is massive. Also, I know a few of you said wing slot is cringe. Yeah, it is, but I love it. I do some more farming in the underground Hallow and finally manage to kill a Hallowed Mimic. It doesn't drop anything too useful, but defeating one means I can spawn them in using the item the Deviant sells for convenience. I rework my accessories to add in the Mana Cloak and the Celestial Handcuffs, staple early hard mode accessories for mages. This is all in the lead up to fighting the Queen Slime, whose summon item I've also crafted. She is only able to be summoned in the Hallow, so I build a small arena and summon her in. As my first real trial of hard mode, the beginning goes pretty smoothly, and then she jumps right off the edge. I'm getting deja vu here, man. This is what King Slime did, man. I extend the arena to account for the incredible mental acuity of the Regal Slimes, making sure there is enough solid ground on either side. Clearly, the real struggle for Skyblock was for the Slimes. Okay, let's get back to it. I spawned her in and got to work. We really only have the Frigid Flash Bolt and the Frost Staff, so we're a bit limited on options vis-a-vis damage, but she jumps off anyway. Like, holy moly, what am I doing? Next attempt, we make the Meteor Staff and try that out against her. It is able to pull off a lot more damage per second, as the projectiles have a lot more velocity and area, things that my kit struggles with otherwise. We make it through to the second phase, where she begins flying about and spawning a lot of projectiles. This wasn't particularly difficult, they're slow and easily telegraphed, so the Queen Slime falls, granting us her treasure bag and her relic. But we can't waste any time. If anyone is a fan of the Calamity mod, you know that there are way too many bosses to waste time celebrating one's defeat. I immediately head into the underground ice biome to get the ingredients for the Cryo Key, which is the spawn item for Cryogen. We're missing a few essences of Ilium and Souls of Night, so we encage ourselves in their respective biomes and spend hours of an otherwise nice day outside holding down the left mouse button. Using some astral ice and snow, I make an artificial astral infection biome to the east of the desert. Much like the rest, once the threshold is reached, the background changes and the enemies begin flooding in. They drop a collection of materials that aren't all that useful just yet, but the biome is required for Astrum Aureus and Cryogen, so that's why I made it. I make a small arena on top of the infection, leaving enough space to reposition horizontally during the fight. I spend some more time in the underground corruption making up for the remaining Souls of Night required for the Cryo Key. I do this by sitting in a sad little rectangle with a Meteor Staff in hand, abusing the power of the Zerg potion once more. I set up a frozen house just outside the Astral biome, so I am able to purchase and make use of the Astral Pylon. This allows me to teleport, saving some downtime between attempts. It's very fortunate that I did, because Cryogen took a lot of attempts. Cryogen's main method of attack is to repeatedly ram into the player, leaving behind little icicles and spikes to catch you retreating. They deal pretty decent damage and can apply a slow, which can easily lead to a death spiral. He has a small shield that can block a small amount of damage before his actual health bar, which regenerates every so often. As the fight progresses, he gets new attacks. It feels like he has like 6 phases, but that could just be me. I fall, unsure of how to proceed next. Even with all the equipment that I'm supposed to have, I cannot output enough damage to beat him before I get 3-shot. Unsure of what I'm meant to do, I just keep attempting with this setup. I get so frustrated with the fight that I actually quit out halfway through my recording and play my Infernum save instead. So that might say something about my current mental state. Worried that I might be enraging him during the fight, spoilers, I wasn't, I decide to build another ice biome to the right of the Astral Infection. Cryogen does have an enraged state, but the Astral Ice biome counts as one he is fine in. So really, I'm just wasting my time here. I farmed some mimics to see what weapons I can procure, with the Hallowed Mimic granting the Crystal Vial Shard and the Corrupt Mimic giving the Clinger Staff. The Clinger Staff will be useful as it can deal decent damage, but most importantly, it'll linger for a while after swapping weapons. It turns out though, that the biggest equipment change I needed was actually equipping the Cobalt armor I crafted. Yeah, you heard me correctly, I didn't have proper armor on, and I haven't since my first 1-block mining session at the start of my batch of recordings. That's over 4 hours of hard mode gameplay with just a miner's outfit on. Anyways, I equipped the Cobalt set finally, and it's not in the vanity section, and we're good to go. For whatever reason, the fight is much more doable this time. I couldn't tell you what changed. My damage output feels stronger, I take way less damage, and I can actually last until my next potion. I whittle him down with the Frost Staff, and we finally win. The only person on Earth stuck on Cryogen has done it again. Out pops the Archwizard, and we can now purchase a few new items, notably the Icicle Trident and the Permafrost's Concoction. The Trident is pretty mid, but the Concoction is worth discussing. It massively increases our mana pool and health regen, increasing the lower our health is. What's interesting is that it also grants the ability to sustain a fatal injury and heal back to 30% health once every 3 minutes. It's abilities like these that make all the difference, and we'll see how this one does. Since I love the Ankh Shield so much, I realized that I still need the Nazar, an item that drops from Cursed Skulls and Enchanted Swords, but I couldn't find any for ages. To set up this farm, I needed a dungeon. This can be accomplished by talking to the Clothier, who actually sells the required building materials for a rather insignificant nominal fee. I set one up in the underground layer and waited for skeletons to roll in. After having pretty lackluster spawns for a while, I figured that the dungeon is usually busier the further down you are in the world, so I make another one further down in the caverns layer. This works a treat, having a huge amount of enemies spawn and giving us a ton of loot. The Cursed Skulls don't spawn as frequently as I liked, but I wasn't really sure what to do with that, so I just waited and killed more skeletons. I finally get lucky and get the Nazar. It was the last item I needed, so I immediately rushed home and crafted a shield. Reforging it to warding, and it gives off a pleasant 18 defense, with the added benefit of giving immunity to knockback and a whole host of debuffs. With the added strength of the Ankh Shield, I am confident enough to take on my first mechanical boss, the Twins. Their high mobility is tricky to deal with, but I settle on using the Frost Staff for its fast projectile speed and light penetration to deal decent damage. The Crystal Vial Shard is also pretty handy for the final phase of Spasmatism, as he will eat the hitboxes, literally. They go down without much fanfare, and our world is blessed with Mithril and Orichalcum. Since we've already mined a bunch, I make the anvil and create a full Mithril Mage set, as I like the stats of the helmet better. The Aquatic Scourge is the next target on my to-do list, which might be a bit of a problem. You see, the Aquatic Scourge requires water in a sulphurous sea to spawn. I currently do not have either. Without even looking into it, I get my stack of sulphurous sandstone and sprint east of the snow pylon and create a huge open square of sand. The aim here is to fill the entire basin with water, but I don't have a lot of it. I was given 50 buckets of water at the beginning, but that won't even give me a single layer of water, so I had to improvise. It's no secret that the fluid mechanics in Terraria are a little bit scuffed, and using this little G-shaped construct, you can repeatedly place water and pick it back up, leaving some to fall below in the process. Using this method, we can fill this pool. I sit here for almost 2 hours and make tiny progress, so I decide to reinvest my efforts elsewhere, just for now. I finish up the arena outside my house, readying for the fight with the destroyer. While my frigid flash bolt has been a little bit unreliable due to the low speed of its projectile, the destroyer is weak to those kind of slow penetrating attacks. All I did was shoot downward over and over again and he dies, granting us the ability to use adamantite and titanium. I waste no time sprinting back to my home to forge both sets to compare them. I settle with the adamantite set as it will grant increased crit chance and defense while attacking, which is ideal for my kind of mage build, man. I use this insane momentum to summon Skeletron Prime in for his fight. I use a combination of my Frigid Flash Bolt, my new Sky Fracture, and my Brimrose Staff. The fight goes very easily, with Skeletron exploding and blessing us with the ability to craft hallowed bars. It should be noted that the defeat of all mech bosses also puts hallowed ore into the 1-Blocks catalog too. Naturally, this also unlocks chlorophyte ore as well, allowing us to craft the entire chlorophyte mage set. It also grants us access to ectoplasm, but I'm pretty sure that's a progression jump over Plantera, so for now I refrain from making the Spectre set, as good as it looks. The chlorophyte armor creates a healing pulse every so often that can restore a pretty nice amount of health. All of these new ores also grant us access to a few new mage weapons, notably the Tears of Heaven. This fires a lot of slow moving projectiles that home in on enemies, a trait that I can't help but love. I also make myself a Celestial Emblem, a key mage item that'll improve our magic damage considerably. I also make the Angel Treads to increase my speed just a little. After a lot more bucketing, I head back to the artificial sulphurous sea to have a look around for the Aquatic Scourge. I don't have enough materials to create the summoning item for him, but according to the ever unreliable boss checklist, he spawns naturally. Sure enough, after a while, the Scourge appears and we begin our fight. Tears of Heaven really cements its viability here, as it does really good damage and can account for the erratic movements of the worm. Now he drops the downpour, but it kinda sucks, so I shelve it for now. Now that the Aquatic Scourge is down, we gear up for the Brimstone Elemental fight. I make some Life Fruit and a Comet Shard, increasing our HP and mana to a new maximum. I extend the false Brimstone Crag to a new size that would let me maneuver far enough left and right during the fight. There's no real surprises during this fight. You know, a lot of small red projectiles and lingering damage clouds that make up the bulk of it, but that's about it. I die once, but swiftly return to take her out. She has a magic item drop that I'm interested in, so I kill her twice more to receive the Seething Discharge. A weapon that is okay, but not the type that I like to use normally, so I leave it on the hotbar, but use it sparingly. Next on the docket is the Calamitous Clone, summoning it using the Eye of Desolation at night. The fight goes super smoothly at the beginning. I'm even able to pull up a few adrenaline charges. This is all up until the end of the fight, where the final series of charges overwhelms me and I die. This happens a few more times before I triumph and take those sweet, sweet rewards. They drop the Ashes of Calamity, which we can use in the Brimflame armor set. This grants us a new power called Brimflame Frenzy, which I absolutely read but never managed to remember to use. Wow, would you look at that? I head down to the jungle biome to fight Plantera. I summon him in and fight him for a while before dying. Now, the arena I made was very slipshod and there really wasn't much room to move around, so I brought my mud blocks down and jungle seeds and I made a much bigger arena that should keep Plantera from enraging and allowing me to dodge his various projectiles. After a real close call, I bring the fight back and I win. He drops a wealth of items, but most importantly, the dungeon now spawns better, stronger enemies that drop better items and ectoplasm. I farm there for a while and get plenty of materials, heading back up to craft. I make the Asgard's Valor, an upgrade to the Arc Shield that gives us a dash that renders us invincible shortly after striking an enemy. A common theme of later bosses is that they charge endlessly, so it'll be a real nice addition to our kit. I set my sights on the Leviathan next, which can only be found by attacking a strange shadow lady in the ocean. This doesn't appear in sulphurous seas, so I will have to make an artificial ocean of my very own. I head further east of the sulphurous sea as it's the furthest I've made it outward. But then when I make it to the edge of the world, the background becomes sulphurous again, so I think I'm just on the wrong side of the map. I take my platforms far west and a stack of sand, this time armed with an endless water bucket to make my ocean. After a little bit of messing around with size and shape, I finally get the mysterious figure to spawn in the water, attacking it to start the fight. Naturally, I get destroyed because I wasn't taking it that seriously, dying quite early on in the fight. This happens a few more times and I give up on it. I go home and try to re-equip myself. I craft a Terraria and shoot some skeletons hanging out in the dungeon. Okay, so here's some bad news. I lost 4 hours of footage right here. The silver lining is I didn't really do much for those 4 hours except defeat Astrum Aureus. I don't remember it being particularly eventful, but I think it's important to mention that I'm just not going to show it. I show the rest of them, but you know. So we resume, just having been beaten by Golem. Yep, that's right, Golem. You might be wondering why we are fighting him, seeing as though a temple could not exist in a world that only started with a single block. What's the solution to this? Well, we just craft the spawn item anyways. The 1 block mod also adds a recipe for the altar, so we can fight him, but he's enraged. Now in death mode, Golem actually gets more defense, moves faster, and his attacks inflict armor crunch while he's enraged, which kind of levels the playing field because he's not a particularly difficult boss normally. A quick side note, I'm using a weapon called the Alula Australis, a magic weapon dropped by Astrum Aureus that drops a mean number of homing stars from the sky. It was pretty decent, so I get a lot of use out of it during the fight. Golem's head will split off after a while and begin attacking more erratically. Luckily, he has a quite simple pattern and it wasn't hard to learn the right way to go around it. After a while kiting the head and unloading various magic projectiles into it, I finally managed to take down the ancient machination. I use his Golem eye drop to make a destroyer emblem, granting increased damage and crit chance. Now that we finally have a Pixor, we can also find Scoria ore in the 1 block. At the rate I was getting it, I would have enough for an armor set in like 4 hours, man. So instead of that nonsense, I decided to wipe out the Acid Rain event so I could meet the Jelly Priestess, a woman who sells Voidstone. Without any research, I decide that I can try and make my own artificial abyss to spawn in the enemies that drop Scoria ore. In a strange twist of fate, making an artificial abyss doesn't actually work. Frustrated, I go home and decide to attack the lunatic cultist, even though I'm pretty sure that's like way out of order. Nevertheless, he is pretty similar to his vanilla counterpart. He spawns in, flinging various projectiles at us and attempting to summon dragons every so often. During the summon, you just attack the very obvious big cultist to disrupt it. As the fight proceeds, it becomes harder to stay close and I create some distance using the Terraria, which is surprisingly still pretty strong. He goes down, heralding the lunar events to begin in full swing across my quote-unquote world. The next order of business is to clear up some of the bosses and events in between that I so graciously skipped over. I start with the Pumpkin Moon, taking down the Morning Wood and Pumpkin. Next is the Frost Moon. I take down the Everscream, the Santa NK1 and the Frost Queen easily, taking their various drops to be stashed away forever. I start the Old One's army, managing to get all the way through to the Betsy wave where I get absolutely demolished. I try a few more times but to no avail. I do manage to actually kill Betsy, allowing me to summon her separately through the Abomination NPC. Failing the Old One's army, I head to my tiny ocean biome with a truffle worm in hand to attempt Duke Fishron. I can't get him to spawn since the pool is too shallow, but a few clicks from the endless water bucket later and we're in business. The Duke appears, dashing and blowing bubbles. His onslaught of attacks aren't particularly dangerous, but I have a hard time reading his attack patterns and go down. I make a Sigil of Calamitous for the enhanced mage stats, warping back to the ocean to extend the arena for a more mobile fight. I try again and I'm able to make it to this phase where he teleports and dashes, but I die because I'm a pleb. This continues for a while. I can't really make a breakthrough as I just get whittled down by his attacks over and over again. Instead of throwing myself at the Duke, I try the Ravager instead, using his Death Whistle summon item in the arena by my house. In typical fashion, he obliterates me before I can really do anything. Defeated, I return to my old friend, the One Block. I mine until my mouse gives out, finally affording enough scoria ore for a full set of hydrothermic armor, which doesn't really give me the edge I need yet, but it's a good start. After attempting to beat the Ravager and Duke again with this setup, I come up with a brilliant plan, the Plague Bringer Goliath. A boss I had very little trouble with during my Infernum run. It should be a piece of cake. Or not. So I come up with an even more brilliant plan. For real this time. Destroy the pillars. As many of you might know, the pillars spawn in when the lunatic cultist dies, which can be defeated for their fragments. The neat thing is we can actually use the fragments combined with the ancient manipulator to craft lunar weapons. After I place down the obsidian insta-bridge, I now have access to where the pillars naturally appeared. I defeat the solar, the vortex, stardust, and the nebula pillar. Normally I would have started with the nebula as it grants us access to the mage weapons, but I don't do forward planning, so that's just how it is here. They drop all of their various fragments, allowing me to craft the Nebula Blaze, a mage weapon that throws purple homing balls at enemies, dealing great damage. Soon after crafting it though, Moonlord appears and tears me limb from limb, but that doesn't matter right now. I also craft the Laser, a direct upgrade to the space gun that deals an immense amount of damage. I also get the Arch Amaryllis, but it doesn't see much use as the other two are pretty good already. Naturally, now that I'm armed to the teeth with weapons breaking the progression chain again, I pay my old friend Duke Fishron a visit, summoning him and scorching him with my new laser. As the fight progresses, it becomes harder to track him, so I switch to the Nebula Blaze and make quick work of him, even at his insane speed. He drops a bunch of stuff I have no real use for anymore, but I do relish in the triumph of beating this guy after so many tries. Since I'm already in the beach biome, I wait around looking for Anahita and the Leviathan. After a little while, I slay the Shadow Lady, enraging the Leviathan into combat. The fight is pretty simple. Stay very mobile and avoid the boulders. Anahita falls first, and then I unload on the Leviathan with an adrenaline-charged barrage of laser rounds, bringing him down very quickly. Again, the loot wasn't much to write home about, but I take the relic and move on. As I missed him earlier, I must defeat the great big sand shark, who I summon in and bring down very easily. At this point, he's more of an enemy than a boss, but there's something so pleasing about ticking it off the boss checklist. I attempt the Plague Bringer Goliath again, but because of his plague attacks, I lose a lot of health to damage over time, whittling me down and eventually killing me. I have the genius idea of crafting the Plague Bringer armor, or at least a chest piece. Equipping this absolutely tanks our damage bonus and removes the armor set effect, but the immunity to plague is definitely worth it. I begin the fight again, and from the jump it's looking a lot more positive. The plague immunity cuts the punishment for a misplay in half, which makes all the difference in longer fights like this. I also mitigate a lot of damage by intentionally dashing through him when it's safe, giving me immunity frames like it's Dark Souls. It's also super satisfying, and it will continue to be a thing that all bosses do, but then I die. Okay, right back to where we were, lasering the big hornet, and bang, we're dead again. Okay, I'm just gonna skip ahead to the successful run. Sorry. This time he dies, dropping cool looking stuff. But again, we've got the best items in slot for now, so they don't see use. Except for the plague staff, but more on that a little bit later. Up next is the big bad Empress of Light. Everyone's favourite boss. except for people with photosensitive epilepsy. I begin looking for a prismatic lacewing, but I can't find one after a few minutes, so I had a look if there's another way to get one. It turns out the drunk princess also sells them, so I quickly rush to make Fab Soul's vodka. Having one in my inventory allows her to spawn in as an NPC. I buy one off of her, but I also take a few other items too. She has a few arena buffs that I can keep on my person to increase my odds in the coming battles. Unfortunately, they have buff icons above my head, which kinda drives me mad, like it's so cluttered. I couldn't really figure out how to remove them, so they're just here now. In any case, we have work to do. I craft the lacewing into a prismatic primrose, a non-consumable summoning item for Empress. I cycle the time to night and begin the brawl. The laser is my weapon of choice normally, but the homing aspect of the Nebula Blaze just makes life so much easier. I take a lot of silly damage and have some pretty decent moments, managing an adrenaline charge or two, bringing an end to the Empress's reign and taking her loot bag, without too much fuss. She drops a few decent items, and I actually keep the Terra Prisma on my person as I have 2 summon slots, so I may as well fill them with a little bit of extra damage. Just so we're clear, the Terra Prisma drops from the Empress without enraging due to a change in Calamity, which is a nice change of pace for summoner enjoyers, but like how are they going to do that in the daytime, man? I take the relic and I move on. Up next is the Ravager, an old friend I struggled with much like Duke. I summon him using the death whistle and it begins. He summons a lot of gross little guys to get in our way, like these fleshy walls that crumble on dealing contact damage. After some effort, he falls. Not getting the magic weapon means another fight with him, but it goes much the same and he drops the Vesuvius. It's essentially a stronger meteor staff, but it's kinda dog water, so on the shelf you go. We swiftly move on to fight the worm Astrum Deus, which is where the plague staff will come in handy. It fires a few projectiles in a fan shape that infinitely pierce and inflict plague, perfect for a multi-segmented worm such as he. To summon him, we must use a Titan Heart at the altar in the Astral Infection. He spawns in with massive damage resist for a small amount of time. After such, the fight really begins. He fires a barrage of lasers at the player, which we can dodge by just flying over. The fight is pretty easy initially, and we can mitigate a lot of damage by dashing through his charge attacks and attacking when we get him on a straightaway. The real trouble is that at half health, he will transform into 2 worms, each with the same amount of health as the original. The pair of worms will behave a little smarter than phase 1, avoiding each other and desyncing so that there's very little the player can do to avoid taking damage. They also fire a ton of lasers and leave behind little mines that I pretty much gravitate towards at any given moment during the fight. Unfortunately, there's no more tricks I can really pull off here, as I have the weapons, armor and accessories one would normally have at this game stage. To beat him, I'll need to get good. I find that switching to the laser in the second phase allows me to maintain a similar damage output at a greater range, keeping me safe from their worms' shenanigans. I managed to get a worm to half health, at which point they start firing these strange projectiles that cover a lot more area. Both worms do this, so ideally I would kill a single worm first and then proceed, but it's pretty hard to gauge which one you're hitting most of the time. I swear they change colour as well, but I don't think I have any proof. I also just remember I'm allowed to make better healing potions, so I summon the pillars and use their dropped fragments to make some super healing potions. I also make the Miracle Fruit, increasing my HP pool by 25. Renewed, I approach Astrum Deus ready to win. Phase 1 goes perfectly, splitting the worm in twain. Using the laser approach, one of the worms is easily beaten before he gets too annoying, leaving us in a simple one-on-one for all the glory. Astrum Deus dies inside the NPC house next to the Astral Infection, making me tear up the icy floorboards for my prize. He drops the Star Shower, a half-decent magic weapon we can add to the kit. He also allows Astral Ore to be mined, which appeared naturally in my biome at some point, but can also appear in the 1 block as well. Just before the final big bad, we summon the Martian invasion as I found I had the summoning item for it in my collection. Naturally, the progression difference is so great that the fight really isn't difficult and they go down easy. It gives me access to the Nano Purge though, another weapon that is like conceptually cool but its viability is questionable. I'm also able to make the Deific Amulet, a direct upgrade to my Charm of Myths, an item I clearly can't live without. I'm a 45-second potion cooldown enjoyer, okay? Is that so bad? All that's left to do is summon Moonlord, and we can do this with a celestial sigil made from the lunar fragments. Moonlord is kind of his usual self. His hands and mind's eye will shoot volleys of projectiles, occasionally interrupted by a giant rotating death ray from above. When the hands die, they lose these smaller projectiles and instead throw larger rings of eyes. They're telegraphed pretty well, so they're not much of a pain to deal with, until you run into them by accident, of course. The core will continually try to drain us of our life essence, but the Nebula Blaze targets these leeches first to stop that from happening. Once all the eyes are down, the core will open and expose the heart. I stay the course and bombard him with the Nebula Blaze while cycling over the top again and again. It seems as long as we stay mobile, it's pretty easy to keep our health regenerating and our damage high. After some time, Moonlord dies and I couldn't even be bothered to get it on camera. Awesome. I stand here waiting for my prize to come to me. It appears he drops all of his important items in one go, like the Last Prism, Starboard, Star Wrath, and Portal Gun. But that's it for now! Wow, this one took a long time. I'm so glad that the first one had such an amazing response. It did so well and it was really only like a palate cleanser for my Infernum run. And it was absolutely putting us through the ringer, so I was like, make another video, something else. Also, it's looking like the mod showcase I did for another RPG mod is doing extremely well, so thanks for that too. So it's going to be goodbye for now, but not forever. I'm so happy for my almost 7,000 subscribers, and I appreciate one and all of you. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have, I would love to see what you thought below. Tell all your friends, we're well on our way to 10k subbies, so let's keep up this epic momentum. Bye!